So I want you to put your hands together for the very sexy, the very expensive Mr. Dominic Quadrico.
Thanks, Lisa. So a few years ago, I was running a workshop for a large financial services firm, and that's where I had a chance to meet Carl. Carl was by far the #1 salesperson at the company. 10 salespeople on the team, he outsold the other 9 combined. So like hero level status, and he knew it. And during one of the breaks of the workshop, I saw a group of people huddle around Carl, right? And they were buzzing about something. Carl looks up at me with this mischievous grin across his face, and he waves me over like, Dominic, come here, you gotta see this. So I walk over to the desk, and what I see is that everyone's attention is focused on this one piece of paper that Carl is holding between his hands. And as I get to his workstation, I see the words emotional intelligence assessment written on the paper. And the thing that Carl is so delighted and eager to show me is that he has just scored a 0 on empathy. He thought this was extraordinary. He's elbowing me in the ribs. He's like, Dominic, isn't this hilarious? And so I'm scratching my head trying to figure out why he thinks this is such a badge of honor that the world needs to know about, when finally a light bulb goes off in my head, and I said, Carl, is the reason why you think you're so successful is because you have a 0 on empathy in navigating these high-stress sales situations? And he looks at me kind of like I'm an idiot, and he goes, yeah, man, of course. And I'm like, got it. You should also consider putting that on your dating profile. The women are going to love it. Carl has come to believe that emotional stoicism is a strength. But how can I argue with him on that when he's been as successful as he's been being the way that he's become? And in his worldview, the reason why he is so successful is because he's been better than anyone else at stuffing out and stamping down his emotions. And now being #1 at what he does is central to his identity of being a man. He's not going to allow in anything that threatens that worldview. Emotional intelligence? Come on. Right? Too many men like Carl have been raised to believe that emotions and emotionality are the enemies to competing and winning, because when a man is competing and winning, he gets called some pretty cool stuff, like successful, ambitious, driven, and even a ladies' man. So yes, while we want men to do the emotional work and to be vulnerable, the reward system quite often favors the status quo. We need a new reward system. And see, there's so many of these essential moments on a man's journey to becoming a man, like shaving for the first time, like earning his first paycheck, like losing his virginity. But there is a moment that is missing. And it's this missing moment that keeps accomplished men publicly decorated and yet privately confused. It's this missing moment that keeps good men feeling disconnected, increasingly isolated, and restless in the lives they created for themselves. That's why we need to create a new moment for men. A moment when a man turns his attention from the external conquests of the outside world and takes his first step on the inner journey, fearlessly confronting the questions of, who do I want to be as a man? What do I want from this life? And what is the legacy that I want to leave behind? This is the bold journey that we need to take, and this is certainly the bold journey that women want us to take. And by the way, when I'm talking to guys, I don't tell them any of that stuff. Because as soon as the word emotions leaves my lips, it's like a full system shutdown. Especially when I'm talking to someone like Carl. He's not interested in having a conversation like that. At least not right now. But there is a kind of man who is interested in having this conversation. And it's a man like James. I wonder if you might know a James in your life. 5 years ago, I went to a men's retreat, and that's where I had an opportunity to meet James, 50-year-old man who I immediately looked up to. The guy was in remarkable shape, looked 10 years younger than he was, seven-figure business, and he had a wife and a couple of daughters that he absolutely adored. And I said, James, man, when I'm your age, I want your life. What are you doing at this men's retreat? What are you going to learn here that you haven't already figured out? And he smiled at the recognition, but just as quickly, that smile drained from his face. And the answer that he gave me sent a shiver down my spine that I could still feel right now. And he said, Dominic, the reason why I'm here is because I feel I'm incapable of experiencing joy. And that scrambled my brain. I'm like, James, how's that possible with the life you build for yourself? How can you not experience joy? He goes, Dominic, I don't know. But all I do know is that when I was young, I set goals and I crushed them, and I did that my entire life. I became really good at it, and it gave me a great life. I'm financially independent. I have a beautiful family, but if I'm going to be honest, I don't really feel much of anything on the inside. And that is starting to scare me. And what I came to learn is that James, like many men, had built his entire life around these external accomplishments. And he became an amazing provider for his family. He became admired and respected by the businesses he built and the communities in which he operated, and he became increasingly numb to all of it on the inside. Don't you think his wife felt that? Don't you think his daughters felt that? You see, this is a script that I've seen play out far too often in the thousands of men that I've coached over this past decade. Men in their 20s are hungry to make something of themselves in this world. Men in their 30s start to reap some of the rewards of the work that they've put in. Men in their 40s have many of those things they've worked so hard to get, but start to wonder why it doesn't feel better. And then men in their 50s start to experience the sensation that Henry David Thoreau calls living a life of quiet desperation. It has been said that the definition of hell is that on your last day on earth, the person that you became meets the person that you could have become. How do we short-circuit that trajectory for the James in your life that maybe you're married to, or that you work with, or maybe you are him? Right? Now, we may have our work cut out for us, because even when a man has demonstrated the desire to do the inner work, he still may face ridicule from other men for undergoing it. Guys, help me out with this one. Let's say it's Sunday afternoon, you're sitting on the couch watching some games, drinking some beers, and you turn to your buddies and tell them, you're going to go on a men's retreat this weekend. Do they, A, put the game on pause, set down the remote, and turn to you to ask probing, insightful questions? Or B, ask you if you need help packing your skirt and heels for the trip? Those stigmas sound outdated, but for too many men, they are far too real. The brilliant therapist and author Esther Perel once said, and I paraphrase her, masculinity does not seem to be this thing that we are just naturally given as a birthright. It is something that we as men have to go out and earn and then vigilantly maintain over the course of life's actions. In that respect, it works a lot like how trust does. You can spend your entire life building trust, and you can lose it in an instant, because trust is fragile like that. As it turns out, so is masculinity. Be a man, suck it up. Are you going to take that? These are all regular moments of reckoning that determine whether a man gets to keep his manhood or not. Hell, a man can temporarily lose his masculinity by not finishing his beer. So until we fix that, until we create that missing moment, that essential entry point for a man to turn inwards, not much is going to change. That's why we need to create a new reward system, a new set of payoffs that's clear, desirable, and in alignment with a man's current worldview. Here are 3 of those payoffs. Payoff number 1, a man who does the inner work plays bigger games. There are far too many men who are only playing the games that they know that they can win. Because a man who hasn't done the inner work, he buries his dreams, he dilutes his desires, he distracts himself in his work or being chronically busy because he doesn't have the inner fortitude to go for what he wants. He doesn't even know what he wants. But a man who's done the inner work can answer those questions. He lives in alignment with his purpose and passion, and he leans out over his edge constantly in everything he does. Payoff number 2, and fellas, you're going to like this one. Women find a man who does inner work irresistible. You see, women have a sixth sense for sniffing out a misaligned man, because a misaligned man is dangerous. And no matter how put together on the surface you may appear, deep down inside, she knows there's something about you that she can't trust. But a man who's done that inner work, he's in alignment. He lives on his edge, in his purpose and passion. He respects emotionality, and he creates safe spaces, and he can honor, see, and support his woman. Guys, that is irresistible. And payoff number 3, a man who does the inner work builds bigger futures for everyone around him. A man living the highest version of himself naturally inspires and calls others forward to do the same for themselves. And in doing so, he creates environments where others can thrive. Families, businesses, communities. He leaves this world a better place than how he found it. These are payoffs worth fighting for, worth changing for, worth doing the inner work for. And all it takes is the desire to find that moment to take that first step inward. And that first step doesn't have to be something grandiose. It could be something as simple as reading a book like Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, which is the book that changed my life and has kickstarted everything that you're hearing about today. It has changed my life many times over. It could be doing work with other men, like going to a men's retreat. I recommend the Mankind Project. It's been around for decades, and they've been helping usher men through doing the inner journey. That's where I met James. That changed the trajectory of my life. And you can also start your own men's group in your local community. For the past year, I've gotten together with 7 other men every single Monday night in Brooklyn, New York. For 2 hours, we do the inner work. That's where I found my voice, my passion. I wouldn't be on this stage talking to you with the kind of conviction I have without that group. One of the men in my group just closed a deal with Elon Musk, if you want to talk about playing bigger games. And the reason why it's so sweet is because it's in alignment with those 3 questions that we had before about who do I want to be as a man, what do I want from this life, and what is the legacy I want to leave behind. Now, I want to take a moment to speak directly to the women in this room. The responsibility for men finding that missing moment to turn inward is not on your shoulders, it is on ours as men. And there's no denying that you have a remarkable ability to influence the men in your life that you care about. So if you feel called, I invite you to call your men forward to take a step on that inner journey. Henry David Thoreau once said that it is easier to sail many thousands of miles through cold and storm and cannibals than it is to explore the private sea, the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans of one's being alone. There are many moments along a man's journey that he must go at alone. But that first moment does not need to be one of them. Let's do this together. Thank you.